we're waiting on Carrie Kemp with the Forest Service, who's not here yet. But yeah, John, if you want to, sure.
Thanks.
Picture.
Yeah, I'm John Callahan with the Chumstick Wildfire Stewardship Coalition, and our big deal is the end of the month. It's our town hall event out at Snowy Owl. This year, our keynote speaker is going to be Paul Hesford. I think a lot of you know who he is. He's really good. And also, Dave Upthegrove, the new Lands Commissioner, is going to come and give a kind of a 10-minute update on the status of what's going on at VNR. Some of it's not good, obviously, but anyway, so save the date. That's one of the big things we're working on. The other big project that's been ongoing for a number of years, and we're on the 10-yard line right now, is remote water storage tanks. These are 22,000-gallon refurbed fracking tanks that strategically would be located out in certain areas of the county where there's no water. Like the Upper Chumstick is one key location. We've got the funding. It was frozen through the Community Wildfire Defense Fund grant, but that's now opened up, thank heavens. And Representative Kim Schreier also got us $823,000, which now has been loosened up too. So the funding's there. It's just getting all the players. They're close, but they're not all together yet. There's things like hold harmless clauses. These are going to be seasonal in most cases. So we have one really good location in the Upper Chumstick that's just perfect, really. So anyway, just getting all the legal documents in order. That's kind of where we're at now. But we're close to getting some ordered. We've met with Chris Peterson, the fire marshal, and she's been very helpful and enthusiastic, but no pun intended. The coalition keeps lighting fires up. So I have information on stuff we're doing. I did a real interesting, I managed deal a few years ago with WDFW on fire and fish, and what Ryan put here up in the Okanagan was a lot of stuff there. Helped us with, I love fishing, of course, but anyway, some really good effects or good information on what big fires do compared to the smaller fires, how these huge fires that we have these days really mess up an entire ecosystem. It basically wrecks the carrying capacity of a drainage, basically, whereas, you know, before fires got so big, a drainage could heal itself better. But I've got a lot of information. If anybody wants stuff, I have it with me tonight, so feel free. Thanks.
It's on the
Remember the
30th.
date, and I have more of these too. It's important when people come.
When is it?
30th.
April 30th.
At what time?
Oh, geez.
Well, if you want us to be there, you better tell us.
Yeah, good idea. It's on here. Basically, there's going to be information tables. Some people here are going to have Colin, this group is. DNR. Hopefully the Forest Service, they've been kind of incognito, which is certainly understandable. I hope they're there. Just various DNR, Fire District 3, the Coalition, others, I can't remember them all. Also, we're going to have a group of panelists. Patrick is going to be one of them. Mike Smith with the Fire Department. Obviously, Paul Hesford.
Katie Zander.
Oh, Katie, yeah. Katie and Jake Hart, yeah. So, thanks, Gia.
You're welcome.
John, remind us what time it is. Is it at 7?
No,
6.
5:30.
5:30.
Yeah. The program, actually, the keynote address will start at 6:30.
Okay, perfect. But come at 5:30.
Yeah. And then there's a panel discussion, 7:30 to 8:30. So it's all late afternoon, early evening, but it's the last couple we've had are just been phenomenal. And it's a great venue, so anyway, hope to see you all there.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a star of one of our shows entered in. She is representing the forester. You want to introduce yourself and your position?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Kemp. I'm the area ecologist for Eastern Washington for the Forest Service. So in my capacity, I cover both the Okanagan and Wenatchee National Forests. And my background is in fire and landscape ecology.
So she will be here to answer questions on fire ecology and landscape ecology. She won't be here to answer any questions on political landscapes. Great, so this first film is just 8 minutes long. It's called Now or Never. It is produced by the Wilderness Society. So the synopsis is, climate change poses new and dangerous threats to our nation's oldest forest. In the West, this looks bigger and more severe wildfires. The good news, we know what we need to do to help save these irreplaceable forests. Creating climate-resilient forests means restoring them to a healthy state. That means thinning out younger, smaller trees that create excess fuels and using prescribed fire intentionally on the landscape. It also means changing our mindset. These forests need us as much as we need them. See what that looks like in Eastern Washington, where we're working with Washington State Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Nature Conservancy, and other local partners, tribes, and communities to protect our remaining old-growth forests.
Pacific Northwest forests are iconic. They provide us with clean, cold water, clean air, and abundant recreational opportunities. But we're losing Pacific Northwest forests to wildfire at an unprecedented rate. Wildfire is really resulting in the loss of these large old ponderosa pines that we've come to love and cherish. So we brought together leading experts from the University of Washington, the Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Forest Service to help us better understand what's happening in our forest ecosystems in the East Cascades. We're losing a lot of our large trees and old growth trees in our dry forest ecosystems in Eastern Washington. And part of the reason why we've gathered all of you scientists here today is to help us better understand the drivers behind the loss of old growth and large trees in our dry forests, and things that we could do collectively to try to address the risk of losing more of these trees in the future. The Shiner Springs fire burned in the mountains outside of Yakima, Washington, near Chinook Pass in 2021. So it's a great place to learn from the effects of fire and to bring our scientific experts to evaluate what's effective, what can we do to prepare our forests for future fires. Garrett and I, when we were scouting yesterday, we picked this spot in part because the area below the road received no treatment.
A fuel treatment is anything that reduces the likelihood of an uncharacteristically severe fire. The most effective form of fuel treatments for these dry forests is going to be a combination of thinning followed by burning.
So when we look way up into these trees, we actually see black the whole way up. So there is enough fire all around these trees that even though these trees are not supposed to actually crown out in a fire, they did.
Ponderosa pines are naturally fire resistant because they have thick bark that protects them. They also have branches that are much higher off the ground than other species of trees. So the fire is unable to climb into the tree and up to the top of the tree. And so when we see really large areas where ponderosa pines have died from fire, what that tells me is that there was really a missed opportunity to do something before that fire happened.
What's going to replace these guys? Like, what are we going to see here in 10 years or 20 years or even 30 years?
We may not get a lot of trees that come back. We may get a lot of shrubs, grasses, and it could take decades or even centuries for trees to get back in those patches, if at all.
I like to think about the large old trees as the backbone of the forest. They store most of the carbon. They're critical for a lot of wildlife species. They provide the seed source for new trees. And so when you lose these trees, it is much harder to have a forest that is resistant to wildfires as well as drought. So we lost, over 6,000 acres, 7,000 acres of old growth forest in one fire. Bam, 7,000 acres just in one fire. And that's happening all over as these fires happen, right? And these trees are not coming back, right? It takes 100 years, 200 years, 300 years to get to this state. And we could have saved this tree. If we'd done the treatment here, this tree could have been alive.
Dry, frequent fire forests depend on fire and have been stewarded by fire for thousands of years. But when you take that fire away, that fire is now no longer something that restores forests. It is something that can threaten forests.
So this site up the hill actually had 3 different treatments between 2008 and 2013. And then when the wildfire occurred 10 years later, there was much less surface fuel.
This stand is now more receptive to future fires. Almost all of the trees that remained after the treatments survived the Schneider Springs fire. And so we would deem this successful restoration.
So what we have to do is create the conditions that those forests are adapted to that is important for stewarding them so that they can survive future fires and future climate change.
We're outside of the perimeter of the Schneider Springs fire, which occurred in 2021. This is a really kind of representative condition of what the area looked like prior to the wildfire that burned.
So yeah, we're seeing a lot of grand fir here, especially in front of us, as well as some smaller Doug fir. That's what when we have a fire, carries that fire up into the tops of the trees.
And then I'd also talk about this crowding of these smaller trees, providing too much heat, too much fire to outright kill these trees in a wildfire. So if we do get a wildfire here, this forest is set up to have a lot of tree mortality.
I would just add that it's really not a question of if it's going to burn, it's really when it's going to burn.
Most of our forests in eastern Washington are in an unhealthy condition. Just have too many trees, which makes it really easy for fires to spread rapidly across landscapes.
In order to, keep these forests, these old trees that we currently have into the future, they're going to need some active management.
We could just start with removing some of the small diameter trees, right? Like thin from below.
I'd probably take out maybe half of these Douglas fir, and we're gonna keep some of these small trees out here, but we're gonna remove most of the small trees.
We could come back through with some prescribed burn after that.
A lot of people think to protect old growth, we have to stay out of it. That idea is killing these forests. For these forests to be healthy, they need regular management, whether that's prescribed fire, whether that's wildfire, whether that's thinning. These forests rely on that regular disturbance and need that to keep them in a more open condition that is what is resistant to wildfire.
We really have to change our mindset about how we think about what a healthy forest is and recognize that, yeah, we need some dense forest on the landscape, but we're missing our open, large tree component. That is the forest that we've lost.
It's both exciting and hopeful because we have something proactively that we can do that can make a real difference and is making a real difference in the world.
Scientists overwhelmingly agree. There is no debate here. Fuel treatments work.
We know what to do. We have everything in place to do it. And we can save these large old trees.
We'll give a little bit of, since we have Carrie here, and her knowledge, if anyone has some questions about kind of what's going on. I forgot to kind of mention the films we picked out tonight are all about prescribed fire, and each come from a sort of different perspective. The first one here being very agency derived, DNR, Forest Service, there's TNC. And then the next one we are going to get into is cultural burning. And so it's the indigenous practices historically that kind of led to the forest that we discovered, came upon. And then the third one is a community-based burning effort focusing on a PBA down in Oregon. And so sort of three different perspectives and angles all about fire and getting it back on the land. Before we jump into the next one, if there's any hot questions for Carrie on, yeah.
So my biggest concern with the whole situation we're in now is how we scale it up so we get a meaningful effect, landscape-wise. Is there any thought on how the agencies can, coordinate with each other and bring it up to scale,
I guess I can stand up so that people can hear me a little better. I think that's a great question, and I think it's a really valid concern. We have a lot of work to do, right? And I think we are making a lot of good progress by coordinating across organizations, across agencies. The Forest Service works closely with Washington DNR and with the county through Good Neighbor Authority agreements. That's allowed us to do a lot of cross-boundary work and be coordinated in our efforts. But I think we also need to take advantage of natural occurrences of fire. And so what I mean there is I don't think we can get to scale on our own. And we have to take advantage of what nature can do for us by allowing good fire to burn under moderate conditions when it's safe to do so. And so there's a lot of risk involved in that. There's a lot of reluctance. There's a lot of personal liability associated with that for the decision makers who decide that we are going to manage a fire differently. And what I mean by differently is our default option is not going to be immediate suppression of that fire. We're still going to manage that fire, but we're not going to immediately suppress that fire. And so I think, it takes, it's going to take some community acceptance of being able to tolerate smoke and risk and fire in your backyard when we have the conditions to do so. And we have seen some good examples of that on the Okanagan Wenatchee National Forest in the last couple of years. We've had some opportunities where it's a little bit of a calmer fire season, where the fires have started further out into the backcountry. It just hasn't been as safe for firefighters to immediately suppress those fires when they've happened. So they've chosen to take an approach where they kind of back off to containment lines and roads. But I really think we need to be able to, not put out every single fire. And so just a quick and somewhat fun statistic that I like to share with people. So the Forest Service successfully suppresses 98% of all fires that start. 2% of the fires that get away from initial attack burn 98% of the area. So the fires that are escaping initial attack are fires that are burning under the most extreme weather conditions that we probably wouldn't be able to suppress anyways. We need to allow some of those 98% of fire starts that are easy to suppress because they start under moderate fire weather conditions to do a little bit more good. And we can do that by doing a lot of pre-planning and saying, where do we have safe containment lines on the landscape that we can prepare in advance, so that if we have an opportunity where we get a natural lightning strike, we can use those containment lines, we can back off, we don't have to take a direct suppression approach and let fire do some good.
Heck of a good question, Steve. That was a great answer.
That's what the fires think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Another question. So all about the cultural aspect of the public in general accepting fire on the landscape. How can we, promote it more? We've had Smokey the Bear for 100 years, and now we want to bring up the alternative mindset and try and impress upon the general public that fire is acceptable in the landscape. But how do we go about doing it?
I can kind of answer that, because that's the job of the PBA, really. And that's, from doing this now for about 2 years, I would say I never really felt a whole lot of pushback. Maybe some pushback against the idea of community-led fire from some agencies originally. But as far as community acceptance, I felt that it seems like there's been a significant shift, that most people, and I think that word is getting out, that fire is going to be our very valuable tool.
Yeah, if you talk to Paul Hesberg, he'll say you need to give Smokey the Bear a drink torch. You've probably heard him say that a time or two.
Well, we got Burning Bear.
We got Burning Bear coming out soon.
Yeah. But I think if I would point to anything, maybe it's the social science research around how we influence opinions and behaviors and how people get their information. And one of the best ways people get their information is through their friends and through their neighbors. And so it really is community-led communication that will change people's minds. And, I've been at places like Ski Hill, where I'm sitting up there with my family, they're out skiing, I'm in the lodge, and just striking up a conversation with a random person who's sitting next to me, and they ask me what I do. And they might be from Seattle, and they have a vacation home in Plain. And they say, man, we bought this vacation home in Plain because we love living in the forest. And isn't it great we get to live in the forest and have all these trees? And it's hard for me to be the one to say, well, do you know that Plain actually has the highest fire risk of anywhere in the state? Like this, and the Chumsted Valley, but it's those kinds of conversations, those casual conversations that help to educate people, help people to feel more comfortable and understand this is a part of our landscape. We live in a fire environment. We are part of that environment.
This might be a bigger question than you can easily answer, but thinking about our watershed from Plain to Leavenworth, essentially the Icicle, we have a lot of land and landowners whose property butts up against Forest Service land. And I will also disclose I'm part of the Chumsted Wildfire Stewardship Coalition, and I also work on goals and policies for environmental and climate planning for the county and Leavenworth and Cashmere and other counties and communities here. So I have a very vested interest professionally, but I also live on the Chumsted. So when we think about all of this adjacent either state or federal land, what can we as community members do to help encourage treatment of that federal land along with the treatment of ours on a bigger scale than just the grants, the micro grants, the cost-sharing programs that we get, that we take advantage of when we can. But is there thinking about this question about like how do we do this at scale? Is there a path to us achieving that in our watershed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something I was actually talking about a little bit with my colleagues yesterday, which is, internally in the Forest Service, often the voices we hear from are the most outspoken. the loudest critics of the kind of work that we're trying to do. And so that becomes part of the narrative about how individuals in the Forest Service think about the work that they're doing. And we don't hear enough from the people who say, keep going, do more, you're doing the right thing, we support you, we want you to do this. And I think it's really important for the local staff, especially the district rangers, the forest supervisors, to hear that there's support in the community for that kind of work. We hear a lot from partners, DNR, county,
Probably groups like Cascadia Conservation District and
TNC. But I don't think we hear enough from the public.
So like advocacy at the community level would play a role and make a difference.
I think so. I mean, there's endless barriers to getting the work done. And sometimes they feel insurmountable. But if you have people who are behind the work that you're doing, it helps motivate you to keep going.
Well, thank you for the work you do for your service. We are extremely grateful.
Yeah.
We're just all trying to
We can't
help.
do it without all the wonderful partners that we have.
Are you local by chance?
Yeah, I live in Woodcatcher.
Oh, awesome. Are you going to come to our town hall? On the 30th? We have a table for the Forest Service, but it would just be so wonderful to have you there, because that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is just build community force, I guess, to help perpetuate these projects and create more impact. And the more people are talking about it and saying yes to the projects, the better.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to join if I can make it.
I noticed at the beginning of this video where the guy talked about the value of not having this forest burned down, and talked about like recreation was the #1 point. And I'm consistently curious about how to sort of like convince or persuade or like inspire people to care more about such natural phenomenon. And like recreation might not be the most persuasive argument to like do tons of work, spend millions of dollars into wildfire mitigation. Have you discovered in your work other sort of means of getting people who might be like on the fence about being passionate about spending tax dollars or whatnot on this kind of thing, if they're not like a wilderness recreationalist, they're not a skier, not a hiker, not like, or I don't care about what?
Or a homeowner.
Yeah, people who are like nomadic people who live seasonally in a place like Leavenworth, what do they care about things like this? Have you picked up any tips and tricks for how to like describe this in a way that fits with them better?
I don't know. I think as a scientist and a resource specialist, we sometimes get bogged down in nuance, in the details, and we really have to make the message clear and easy for people to understand. Simple. I think that's an important part of that. I think there are some scientists that do a very good job of that, and Paul Hesberg has done an amazing amount of work in this community and across the Pacific Northwest to create products that really communicate the urgency of kind of the wildfire crisis that we're in. And so I think that kind of stuff helps. But the other thing I would say is just, and there are folks here that probably talk to this better than I can, but the state of Washington decided to invest heavily in forest restoration work after 2015, when there were massive wildfires that threatened homes and communities, especially up in the Okanagan Valley. And that tends to be what motivates people. They react when they have a very close call. And so, it created a lot of momentum and created an incredible partnership between the state and the Forest Service to do a lot of good work and to fund that work. And that's really important. But, state lawmakers didn't really get on board with the value of it until things were burning down. So I think that's a challenge that we face, is how do we proactively communicate so that we're not waiting until, your house is within a quarter mile of a wildfire and being burned down to actually make some changes. So I think all the great work that different organizations, Chumstick Wildfire Coalition, Cascadia, PDA, the Conservation District, all that work is really, really important in getting the word out.
We're going to cut it off there for questions so we can watch some more films.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen. I think this next one will kind of really well tap into that last question, sort of like the reasons why. And historically, the indigenous peoples had infinite amount of reasons why they're tending to the land for security and resources and all sorts of stuff. So I think this movie, now I was originally picking out ones that I was hoping were less than 20 minutes, and then the other day I was like, I better just watch this to see. And I'm going to warn you, it is an hour, but I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a really good film. I kind of have to slip it into this film fest. But I know an hour is a long time, and I know some people need to leave at certain points, so don't be offended if you need to stand up, move around, use the bathroom, get up and leave. But I encourage you all to watch this one. Synopsis. So, firelighters. Our relationship with fire is out of balance, leading to catastrophic wildfires. Firelighters follows Yurok and Karuk burning rights activists as they share their knowledge and provide solutions to this global problem. Between lightning strikes and indigenous burns, most landscapes in North America were shaped by fire for centuries. Indigenous people have and still have deep knowledge of the art of using fire. For most of the 20th century, U.S. federal fire policy was guided by a strategy of fire suppression, which has been one of the main causes of current catastrophic fires. Native Americans faced persecution and penalty when they tried to use fire in line with their traditions, even on public lands where they often hold treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather.
In Northern California, wildfires are now catastrophic.
There's this weird intro. I'm not sure what.
Anyway, you know everything's on fire. But to many native tribes, the solution is controlled fire.
Fire is meant to be part of the ecosystems.
It makes the land feel better.
It's really gratifying to see how clear the land is. Also, all of this new growth.
Firelighters. Fire is medicine on Local USA.
That is so awesome. I love this. Look at that.
Okay, for how much fuel?
You're about halfway full. Testing. Still not full.
Grandfather, grandmother, see us here, your children. Guide our hands as we bring fire back to the land to restore our environment. Help us to teach those outside of our world what needs to be done to bring ourselves back into balance. We're going to reach out and we're going to put fire on the land now. And then we're going to pass it on to our indigenous brothers and sisters so that they may lay fire on the land also. Wachla, wachla, wachla.
We're fire lighters. We are not firefighters. We don't chase it. We light it, and we work with it.
You feel it so much when you're out here. Can't not feel it. When you look at areas of forest that used to be open plains and prairies, they're Douglas fir plantations now, and that's because of colonization.
This is who we are, and this is part of our culture. We're playing the part that we're supposed to play in the ecosystem.
We've been taking care of this land for thousands and thousands of years. When the Europeans came, they came to these park-like landscapes and thought that they was naturally that way. They was that way because we stewarded the land, and you can see what a hands-off approach has done. We have mega fires because they said, hands off. Nobody do anything to that land, and anytime a fire starts, you're gonna put it out by 10 o'clock the next morning, and any native you see starting a fire, you shoot them.
It's 150 years of fire seclusion because the Forest Service didn't think that people could maintain land, didn't have that skill, didn't have that ability. We didn't sit in that classroom. This is our classroom. This is our church. This is our grocery store. It's our pharmacy. This is where we get what we need.
First springer of the year. We live next to the Klamath River. Our reservation extends on a mile on each side. The river is like our lifeblood. The tattoo on my face is called a 111. It is a traditional tattoo of the women in our tribe and our neighboring tribes. So I was taught that it is a symbol of beauty. I got mine when I was 50, little past puberty.
I wander out in these mountains. I gather up as much as I can and I process them and give them to elders, to single families. And just make sure that everyone in the community always has good food, healthy food. I pretty much eat roots, barks, things. I think I'm part wild. We always ask permission from nature to take something because it's not our right to just assume that we can do that. I asked if I could take these for you girls. So here you go.
We'll start this way. You ready? Yeah. Okay. Started burning at 4 years old, as any curious child will do. I was playing with matches, and my grandfather, who was blind, smelled the smoke. And he made me put the fire out, and then I was told to sit at his feet. And while sitting at his feet, I was informed of who I was as a true human being, what my responsibility was to the earth, what my responsibility is to the people, to the land. So very young, I got a lesson in, okay, we don't play with matches because fire is a tool. Fire warms us, it cooks our food. Fire restores our environment. It takes care of our land, takes care of our plants, our animals, takes care of the water. All this charcoal and ash that we put on the ground leaches back into the water table and purifies the water.
Fire is meant to be part of the ecosystems, and as people, we also play a very critical part in utilizing fire to keep our ecosystems healthy. The animals rely on fire because without fire, the land becomes so choked with brush, they have no place to live and raise their young.
Fire is regrowth. It's new life, it's regeneration. You know, when you open it all up and it can breathe and the water can get down into the trees and the plants, instead of just hitting the leaf dust and floating down the hill and not going into the water table. It gives me the ability to get materials I need, foods I need. It makes the land feel better.
This place actually used to be about 50% prairie, so it was attractive to settlers. Back in the Dawes Act, also known as the General Allotment Act, they sent surveyors out here, and they decided that one way to assimilate Native people was to give them ownership of land. All the rest of the land that wasn't allotted to people, they declared surplus. So, of course, all the big timber, all the redwood places down by the mouth, they was all surplus, and big timber barons bought them. The settlers were given so many acres to create homesteads and farms. They saw the trees as a crop that could be exploited, so they logged all the big ones. A combination of these timber barons planting fir trees where they didn't belong and not allowing Native people to burn like we used to, the fir trees were allowed to encroach on even those prairies that hadn't been planted.
We're coming out of a huge fire suppression. It's been about 150 years. We have forested areas. I wish we only had meadows and prairies and grasslands, because we probably would have been a lot further along by now.
We, as a society, have had it pounded into us for over 100 years that fire is bad and all fires need to be put out. In the late 1800s, Native people were actually shot for trying to take care of the land with fire. In the early 1900s, around 1930, laws was written against the average person being able to burn. And the Forest Service was ordered to put every fire out by 10 the next morning. The result of removing the ability to use fire from Native people resulted in diminished food sources, diminished water quality, wildfire risk, all of these very detrimental things to the environment and to us as Native people. And so that's what we're living with today. The right to use fire is heavily regulated by the government, and we need to follow the rules and regulations that they have established or risk very severe consequences.
With climate change exacerbating everything, the state of the forest right now has a lot to do with the way that it's been managed. In order to be able to get fire back on the landscape at a management level, we have to reduce the fuel loading and the number of trees per acre. That's restoration. It's kind of funny that I found myself in the position of being a forestry director, because I feel like I stumbled on this career that really just suited me as a person. I've always been an outdoor person. You know, my mom tells me about when I was a baby, and they said that I loved it outside so much, and so they'd take me outside, but they would try to bring me back in the house, and I would cry as soon as they stepped foot in the door, step back out with me, and I would stop crying, step in, cry, step out. They were young parents, so they probably thought that was really funny. In my lifetime, what we're looking at now is pretty normal, and I'm just now trying to training myself to change my lens and try to think back to what this would have looked like 100 years ago. One of the ways that we can do that is look at the residual trees, the larger diameter trees, or sometimes the stumps on the landscape, and you can kind of understand what the spacing was before when we were actually managing. And when you're looking at these large tan oak trees, they were undoubtedly managed to be that. We, as Indigenous people, were manipulating the landscape for food production. So that's my process right now, to look at the spacing in here, and it's really hard to maneuver through. When you put fire on the ground, you're going to have a little bit of tree mortality. Sometimes not actual mortality, sometimes you're just having the scarring. But that's all helping this ecosystem and the process for, not just our own food production, but for habitat as well for animals. When these tan oak trees get to a certain diameter, they're likely to have rot on the inside, where the inner portion of the tree is starting to rot and it becomes soft. So that's really important wildlife habitat when it gets to these certain diameters. Decadence. The cavities are really important for animals. And so cavity recruitment is a really slow process. We, as Native people who are managing with fire, were acting as ecosystem engineers to initiate some of the scarring and to start that cavity development. When we're talking about management with fire, that's a missing component, is the human influence. In a young forest, those are really rare things. Cavities and the standing dead trees are really uncommon in a newer forest.
This is what happens on a daily fire. We do business on the side of the road. We sign checks, stuff them in envelopes.
Doesn't say what floor, says I was gone.
Margot and I have known each other our whole life. We grew up in culture training together. We went to culture training with our elders. Twice a week, we had to go. Our parents would drop us off, and we would wear our regalia, and we learned how to do our ceremonial dances. We learned our songs. We learned our stories. We learned who we were. And over the years, obviously, I left home when I was 18. I went away, I went to college, raised a family, got married, got divorced, all that. Came back. I happened to be at the community center in Wichpeck one day, and Margot walked in, and we just kind of smiled at each other, and we chit-chatted a little bit, and she wandered off, and I wandered off, and Bob McConnell, he was our former executive director, he said, I want you to go help Margot with fire. I was like, yes, finally, I get to work on fire. A few years ago, Building Healthy Communities came into our reservation and asked us what we needed. You're in a very rural place. You have no hospital. You have no grocery stores. There's really no transportation other than the tribal van that will pick you up and take you a few places. What do you guys want out here? What do you need? And everybody in that room said they wanted fire back on the ground. The elder women, the elder men, the young people wanted to know how to gather but didn't know what to gather and didn't know where it was. So we started out to work on fire. And the young man that was there said, well, you know, it's going to take us at least 5 years to accomplish this. We're going to have to get 500 people in this room. We've got to get media. We've got to get cameras. We've got to get all these people. And he said, well, you know, you just don't understand about an action item. You got to get people out there. You got to talk about it. You got to protest. You got to do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, that's just wasting my time. And we all said, we're really sorry, but we can do this on our own. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. And the poor man went away defeated.
Fire was our #1 issue. We needed to reduce the risk of fire danger because we was actually living in a tinderbox.
We're in areas that have fuel laying everywhere, and we have to be really careful about that. We can't just light the forest on fire and let it go. It actually needs to be tended. Prescribed burns, you're doing land restoration, you're clearing dead and down fuels. We're going in, we're clearing, we got to get all this stuff cleared up. Somebody's home is safe, an elder is safe, a family's safe, a forest is safe. That's a prescribed burn or a controlled burn. But a cultural burn is for resources. It's for plants, basket materials, medicine, food. It's to be able to open a forest up like this so you can see for miles. It, you know, revolves around the animals, it revolves around the trees, it revolves around the food and the medicine.
It was at least a year before we was able to do first burn. It was 2013 or 2014. And it was done in a traditional hazel gathering area, and they burned 7 acres. So exciting.
We use the hazel and the willow for baskets. Having the ability for them to come out and gather again is something that, you know, I didn't actually think would happen in my lifetime. Everybody was excited. People were driving by cheering and, you know, don't put the fire out, let it go, they kept saying. You know, and we were like, we're not putting it out, don't worry, you know, we're right here. And one young man came back and he brought me a little jar of jelly and I said, oh, what's this for? He says, my mom thinks you're the greatest person on earth. And I said, well, I don't know about all that. He goes, no. He goes, she was so excited that you young women are out here burning for materials that she couldn't even find, you know, before. And he said she's actually starting to want to weave again because she knows those materials are available.
So exciting. We was thrilled we was going to have hazel again. We had a celebration at the community center in Wichpeck. And then we started planning our next burn.
From there came Cultural Fire Management Council. We formed as a nonprofit. I'm the Secretary for Cultural Fire Management Council. Margot is my boss. She's our executive director.
The TREX model of burning was developed by the Nature Conservancy, and it stands for Training Exchange, and it is a training for qualified firefighters. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge that we are on Yurok ancestral territory. The Yurok people have never been removed from our homelands. We have resided here for tens of thousands of years. The people that come from all across the United States and other countries, and their qualifications range from, this is my first fire, to decades of experience. And when we say train, you get experience doing it with this qualified mentor teaching you how. So our TREXs are cultural burn training exchanges, and we make sure that while the people are here, we are sharing some of our culture with them. We have a reciprocal relationship with nature. We depend on it, and it depends on us.
It's like a classroom setting. So we have a base set up where we have sandwich boards everywhere, easels. We have papers put up on all the walls. They have our burn zones. They have our thoughts and ideas about how we're going to go about doing it. We take field trips out into those units before we actually ignite.
Our burn units are going to be down below us. We have with us today a couple of plant experts, the fabulous Claire Brown, and also Monica. They've been doing plant surveys on the different units, logging what is growing there, and they will come back in afterwards and see how our work affected the plant population.
I never went looking for fire. Fire found me. It's hard to find things in this life that you can give yourself to that feel greater than you. Okay, yeah, you can barely see it.
Yeah.
I was born in Hawaii, having a background with growing food and like engaging with seasons and a bit more earth connection, which is really similar to the community I've met here. Whenever I came here and got invited to be here and stay a while, I started to plug into the community and like try and hear like what the ask is and what the need is. And when I first moved here, it was like pretty predominantly fire. Okay, I've got a strong body, like maybe that's a way that I can start plugging in. I volunteered and spent a couple weeks getting trained on how to cut fire line and how to engage with the forest, how to read winds and fuel types and what trees were what. At first, I was just like, had no idea what the hell was going on. It was so over my head.
Okay, so
but by the end of that week, I was like, I'm hooked. But meeting Margot and Elizabeth was one of the first reasons that I decided to really give fire a go. I have been really, really lucky and really privileged to learn everything I know about fire from women, Yurok women, Indigenous women.
Guide our hands as we bring fire back to the land, to restore the ecosystem, to restore our food sources and our medicinal sources.
Yahweh,
Walk.
Yahweh, Yahweh, hey, okay, hey, Yahweh, 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 After we start that initial fire with the wormwood torches, then the guys will light up their drip torches from that, which are a mix of diesel and regular gas. We always start at the top of the slope. Critically important if you want to keep a fire under control, to start at the top, at the highest point.
As soon as you hear fire on the ground, you can feel your heart just start to da-da-da-da-da-da, and like all of your senses have to be alive. You have to pay attention to the wind, to the ground, to the trees, to the fire, to the smoke, to what people are saying what.
Perfect, copy that, thank you.
It is such an adrenaline rush.
Fire lines are put in basically anywhere from 6 to 10 feet wide and down to bare mineral soil. There's hose lays put on them to mitigate any situation, and that's why we have people out in the units, roving the units, looking for any potential spots or anything like that.
There's firing and holding are the two biggest teams. The firing team directly feeds the earth. Firing is going to make their way back and forth along that, pulling fire down, and then as they do, we're going to have holding teams along every edge of that. So on the two sides, like as they're coming down, and on the top. So that way we have eyes all around and making sure that that fire stays in the lines of where we want to keep it.
See, I might have a lighter. We have made fire! Well, we use sticks to light this little bottom part. We're like, we don't need torches.
Pushing the weather wind that way. Yeah.
As we bring the fire down the hill in strips, when we get close to the bottom, we will finish burning just the outside edges, and then we can go all the way down to the bottom and light it from the bottom. And it flares up really big because fire loves to race uphill. And so when we're lighting it at the bottom of the hill, when all the top is already black and the sides are black, it flares up really big. It races up the hill till it meets that black, and then there's no more fuel for it to burn, and so it just dies down.
I'm bubbling with joy with the way that today went. I'm so impressed that, we went through and lit up the bottom and it shot up the hill and met up with the road prism like they predicted. And it was hard work, but I'm just so happy.
This is one of the burn units. We call it the transfer unit. It's really gratifying to see how clear the land is. and also all of this new growth. We have really greatly reduced the fire hazard in this area. So this is actually rated by CAL FIRE as very high fire risk area along this stretch. It provides cultural resources as well as providing wildfire protection. This is actually a place that's full of hazel, and so it was one of our priority places to burn. Now we can see between all of the trees down to the ground, we can see up to the skyline. It's also returning into some grasslands. So that's also an important priority for us to restore the grasslands, because there are certain species of animals that's their preferred territory, elk being one of them. So at one time, our lands were about 50% prairie, and we had a lot of elk here, but there's no more elk here. They're over the ridge where there's grass, and so our goal in restoring the grasslands is to bring the elk home.
So this area I'm walking in actually is part of a program through the Roots and Shoots. And you can see all these young Doug firs in here in an area that's really crowded out and suffocated. But as you go through and you look around and see where all these young firs are, they've crowded out the bear grass, you know, and they've shaded out the ground so certain things won't grow underneath them anymore. And, you know, and then when you're able to leave that area and you come out into an area where the ground starts to open up more and the fire has been here and consumed a lot of the dead and down, then you'll come out into an area that has, you know, amazing clearings that are open, accessible for the people to gather, and a lot less young Doug firs. So you'll see some new trees coming in, some new grasses coming in. So you have a completely different forest type here. This ground has been maintained. This is, you know, the difference between an unmanaged forest and a managed forest.
It's very clear in the landscape when you look now, like after 100 years or so of fire suppression, that the places that people have been able to keep burning here and there, like this place where the hazel is, have this incredible diversity. It's what keeps these places alive. This was burned 1 year ago, almost exactly to the day. Margot asked me and Monica to try to develop this plant study to help track how the burns are changing the vegetation over time. CFMC as a group developed a list of questions that would guide this plant study, and some of the questions are just like, what plants are here in the landscape? Okay, cool. And now let's just walk the plot and get the whole plant list, and then we'll estimate the cover. Lupin. Lupine. And then, like, are burns making it weedier? Are they bringing back native plants? Just, like, what's going on? Monica and I have been putting in these monitoring plots. We go to a place that's going to be burned in the coming season, walk around, get familiar with what plants are growing where. And a plot is just kind of like a snapshot. Basically list all the plants that are growing there and then do an estimate of their cover. It gets burned, we come back and then document first the effects of the fire, like how much of the leaf litter was consumed by the fire, how much of the shrubs were. Did it barely burn at all? Did it kill any trees? And then after that, the regrowth.
spending a day in the woods, I can come out here with just my water and myself and be fine all day long and not realize that I didn't bring any food, you know, because it's out here. Most people wouldn't know what to do for a toothache or an injury or anything. You know, the nearest clinic is an hour away. The nearest hospital is an hour and a half away. Most of the indigenous peoples all around the world still practice and use their traditional medicines.
Going to the medicine patch here. Ready? Flip forward. 1, 2, 3. There we go. All right. Going to the medicine patch. Remember what this is called?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Wormwood.
Yeah, wormwood. What do we do with the wormwood?
Cook it in the house.
We cook it in the house, huh? All right, what do we tell the wormwood?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Waka. You gonna show Grandma what you got? What you got? What is it? Awesome. Is it wormwood?
Yeah.
Nice. Count them. 2, 3. You gotta help go because it's really hot. They're hot. Okay, let me put that one on. Thank you for your help. Now we just let them sit and we gotta wait for them to harden up. And then we'll put the labels on and they're ready to give out. Thank you. Oh, awesome.
So this is one of the medicinal teas. It is called the lemon balm. And oh my gosh, it smells so good. You can make it into a tea, and it is a mood enhancer. It makes you happy. Because there is so much vegetation that has been reduced on the hillside, it has enough water to flourish now. This is the soap root. Look at that. Is that cool or what? So it's these hairs that you use for the basket brush, and the bulb part that you use for either soap or to get rid of poison oak.
We don't metabolize modern foods, I guess you would say. We didn't have fried foods, you know, we didn't have all the sugars, all these things that other people are able to tolerate. We don't metabolize alcohol because alcohol was never something we had. So we have huge amounts of diabetes because of the alcohol, the sugar, the food in general is not healthy for us, you know, as people in general. It's not healthy for anyone, but especially for people that live off the land. We eat just about everything that comes out of the river, sturgeon, salmon, eels, trout, steelhead, everything, you know, we eat all of that. You can find river mussels. So, you know, it's perfectly reasonable that a person could survive out here without having a grocery store or a pharmacist for that matter. You know, you have everything you need here.
Fish. And you say Koishta.
Koishta.
Having those foods available and knowing that our babies get to eat these things, you know, our kids are used to eating acorns and salmon and eels on a daily basis.
So this right here is acorn soup. Best way to eat it is with smoked fish. So this is traditional, cooked with rocks. These rocks right here come from the river, river bar. You find them down below here. They're like an iron rock, and so they're made to get red hot. These rocks don't bust when they get red hot. The average rock gets red hot, it'll crack. We make flour out of the acorn, and we make to make soup. We leach the acorn first, and get all the acetanic acids out of it, and so then it sweetens the acorn. We put them in the wood stove to get them hot, red hot, and then we just cook it right on the stove. Traditionally, you use a basket made out of hazel and spruce. So when it gets wet, it kind of, basically it doesn't leak. A little over a gallon of flour makes about 15 pints, 15 to 18 pints. So and then that's how we process it basically, so you can have it on hand to eat all the time.
I wove for a while when I was younger, and then I didn't weave for a while, and then I kind of got back into it. This one here I did several years ago. I call it the bridge design because it's on the bridge up there. But it's a tobacco pouch. This black is black fern, and the red is a woodwardia fern. We call it pa'at, and it's dyed with alder bark to make that red come out. And they used it to tie on like this and tie it on to use. And they had Indian tobacco in it.
Where everyone else has dishes, we had baskets. We ate out of them, we carried water in them, we carried our babies in them. We wear them for ceremony. Our men carry a jump dance basket. It's one of the most gorgeous baskets there is. And when they lift that basket up to the heavens, they're lifting medicine up to pray. And those baskets are woven by some of our best weavers. You know, they're just gorgeous.
I learned to weave baskets in elementary school about 4th grade. It was during that time that they had what was called the NICE program, and they hired elders from the community to teach us about our culture in the schools. And then I went many, many, many years without making any other baskets. So I'm just putting the sticks in to soak so that they'll be pliable. Weaving is like food for your soul. It's just soothing. There is something about it that you don't really understand or know until you've done it. Connecting to the generations past and bringing that into the present day. The materials themselves and interacting with the spirit of the hazel and the willow roots. Fire having created these beautiful sticks, and so there is a lot of interaction between the weaver spirit and the things that materials we're working with, as well as with fire. This is eel basket. It is the first time I'm attempting to make an eel basket, and it is made with hazel, and it is to trap eels in the river. So this part here is a funnel, and the big wide open part of the funnel will face downriver, and the eels will swim in and get trapped in there.
There's a lot of time and energy that goes into making, you know, the regalia, the baskets, the things that we do. And there's a lot of medicine and prayers that need to go into those things.
You pray, like, for the baby not to get harmed while they're in the basket. You gotta, like, think in your mind, I hope nothing bad happens to them. Like, you gotta think good thoughts. All these stitches are like one prayer. And these are to put the baby to sleep.
We brought back something that was really kind of dying with our younger people. They just didn't have access to the sticks, to the bear grass, to the ferns, to the things we needed.
being able to go into your ancestral territory and gather materials that you couldn't find before because of fire seclusion, and the ability to carry our culture since time immemorial.
Side of that fir, on this side it's like going pretty good at the base and starting to go up it, and that fir doesn't look like super healthy.
How do we spread this? How do we make this bigger? How do we talk to other tribes? How do we bring them on board? Because the more indigenous people you have working on a project, the more voice you have. And so the Indigenous Peoples Network was born. The IPBN evolved out of cultural fire, out of working with the Karuk tribe and the Hupa tribe. And so Margot was working with Mary Huffman from the Nature Conservancy. And we started having all these meetings, and we started talking about what we were going to do as 3 tribes, how we were going to convince our tribal governments that we needed to be able to burn in our territory with their blessing, and that we would do everything we needed to do safely.
When you are a person of European descent and you have been raised through Western science, you have to kind of start to listen and be quiet. In the Nature Conservancy, these fire networks that we've been building and these fire partnerships we've been building all over the country really didn't adequately include Indigenous people. They had been burning for tens of thousands of years, and as Indigenous people say, since time immemorial, since time before memory. We sat down with people from the Hupa, the Karuk, and the Yurok tribe. We just asked the question, does this make any sense in a tribal context, this idea of partnering and networking across landscapes and sharing knowledge and learning from each other and getting burning done together? And a Hupa man said, well, you know, tribes aren't always, they're not the same. They're all different. And he said, but we 3 tribes have a similar fire culture. We have very different languages, but we have a similar fire culture, and we are really trying to get more good fire on the ground. So we'd be willing to try it. I really wanted to know how these people wanted to shape their fire future and let Indigenous people lead. And so the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network very quickly defined itself where we would focus on cultural burning and revitalization of fire culture rather than just be like any other fire partnership.
The Indigenous Peoples Network started to grow out of this. So we went from the 3 tribes, we're spreading out across the United States. We're working with other tribes to help them get their burning rights back, helping them find their burning history.
Got a vehicle coming down.
If we can do this across the United States, if every tribe, you know, truly wants to restore their ancestral territory, then we can put on training exchanges in their areas where we go and we work with them. We show them the techniques that we use. We can adapt or amend what we do to their environment, and then help them to get through the policies, you know, the permitting policies, the red tape that holds so many of us back. You really have to be dedicated to what you're doing.
Roy, do you guys know how big?
They are talking right now about a very important issue of how do we cut through the red tape, how do we get through the permitting process. And so because we're running out of time, I do want to give you guys a little shake it out if you need to, so that we can show our last film, which does talks kind of about the red tapes and the permitting process and how we as community individuals kind of get involved. This last one is through the Rogue Valley PBA. Very similar to what the Cascadia PBA is doing here, and very much looks like the burns that we're conducting. So do you guys want to take like 2 minutes to stretch out or grab a drink and shake it? Yeah, let's give it 2 minutes, and then we will watch the final one. Oh, we forgot to give a round of applause for the Yurok. Oh yeah.
you said training, correct? The new one's about 50 cents. And then 22,000. Oh, yeah, right. But they're less than 8 foot, so you can haul them on a highway. How'd you hear about it? Yeah, they're semi. Okay. They're actually exposed. It really is. So you're not partially there? Oh, they're going to be permanent. We put in that fire tank up there, fire station. Yeah, that's how it all I remember is priming inside well. But we can
Okay, so our final film of the evening comes from the perspective of the community sort of led burning. This is going to feature the Rogue Valley PVA down in Rogue Valley, Oregon. The director of the film requested I share this synopsis. Fires are part of where we live, but there is much more to learn. How do we keep the land healthy while still protecting our communities from fire? Can we have a positive relationship with fire after seeing how destructive it can be? How do we tackle the insurmountable workload needed to prepare for fires? With a background in wildland firefighting, Michael Sherman has a passion for forest fires and the ecological balance they provide to the landscape. Having grown up along the Mackenzie River, which was also greatly impacted by the 2020 Labor Day fires in Oregon, he understands and feels the weight fire can put on our communities. A major goal for Michael with his filmmaking is to help others better understand the nuances of forest fires and the benefits that fire can bring. Many people do not have a positive relationship with fire. Burning to Heal seeks to share the intricate role fire has on the landscape and also conceptualize what a positive future with fire could look like. Instead of seeking to control fire in nature, hopefully we can find a way to work with these unbounded elements so that we can all thrive.
It's really important to understand that fire is in our...
Deal with that reality. That's an emotional process. It's also an educational process. And, you know, with the broadcast burning we're doing, it can also be an experiential process. I think that one of the benefits of doing community-led broadcast burns, prescribed burns, is the ability to reclaim what fire means for people.
You know, now with the way that the fire crisis is going, a lot of people are looking for answers and trying to figure out how they can make their communities safer, make the land healthier. This is about community empowerment. It's about a community making decisions for itself, for the kind of future that it wants living with fire.
We're in Southern Oregon. For us here in the Rogue Valley, when we think of fire, often the first thing we think about is how many homes we lost in 2020. It had been a red flag day all over the state. There was a lot of loss that day. There were over 2,500 homes burned. The majority of the affordable housing in our valley were wiped out in a single day.
My family was evacuated. I was off duty, but went down to help, as did virtually everybody in my department. I ended up working that night on my road. So the fire line was my road where my house is. It's challenging even now, you know, to work through the social impacts, you know, on the schools, the community.
So it was a huge impact here. And really reshaped and redefined how we dealt with the entire community since.
I think both personally and professionally, the silver lining with the Alameda fire is that it raised awareness of the risks in our area, in our state.
I think for a lot of people, that was a really traumatizing event, of course. And it's led to a lot of thinking about what can we do to avoid that? How can we move forward? And have a different relationship with fire, one that's not based on fear and waiting for the inevitable smoke plumes that are going to come in July and August and September and waiting for fires to happen. But instead, we can re-envision our relationship with fire so that it looks something more like this.
Yeah, it would be hard to, with a straight face, advocate for certain approaches to wildfire mitigation if we didn't have an experience it ourselves. I'm a rural landowner, and I figure I should go through it first so I know what I'm talking about when I recommend this kind of practice to another person. Myself, this has been about a 12-year process, asking questions about what the land might want, what the land might benefit from, and then asking with the new lens of, okay, how do I manage a forest? How do I steward a forest? And hopefully I'll be able to take that experience and that education that I've gleaned and, you know, pay it forward to my neighbors. We've gone through and mechanically thinned probably about 50 acres at this point. Bringing back fire is sort of one of the final steps, and we're going to be doing a community-led broadcast burn. When I brought the Rogue Valley Prescribed Burn Association, when I brought Aaron up here, he was like, well, this is ready to go. And I was just really excited.
But you see, the mechanical fuel reduction didn't remove all the fine fuels that generally carry wildfire. And so if a wildfire came through here now, it still could rage at a high intensity. So using controlled burning to come through and consume the fine fuels helped make this stand safer in the future.
For a long time, it's been difficult for people to do prescribed fire on private land. You know, that's just the way it was fire belonged to professionals only, and you needed to have expert qualifications, and it made it seem like there was no role for the ordinary landowner, community member to access this kind of knowledge, this kind of tool. And so obviously a landowner can't just do this by themselves. It takes a village, it takes a whole community to make this happen. So now we're helping to put that back in the hands of people with the right skill, the right equipment, and following all the appropriate permitting processes and so on. So who here, this is your first prescribed burn? Cool, look around. Nice, welcome. exciting.
One of the things that's really valuable about the Prescribed Burn Association and the way that we facilitate prescribed burns with bringing such a wide range of experience, just actual genuine skill sharing where it's like, okay, you live here, you live in this area, fire is part of where we live, you've got to learn how it works.
Who's here to learn? Who's here to teach? That was a trick question. You should raise your hand both times, all of you. We all have something to share, and we all have something to learn.
Generally, when we see flames, we're thinking about how best to stop them. You know, where do we put people, vehicles, water to put them out as quickly as possible? In this case, it was a shift where I'm helping folks put fire on the ground to create a safer, more resilient, healthier environment. And so for me, it was a shift for sure. But once we got underway and worked through the process, it felt comfortable.
You know, prescribed burn is essentially the opposite of a wildfire. So when a wildfire starts, it's usually pushed by the wind or it's going upslope and it runs really fast. And so what we're doing with a prescribed fire is we're doing the opposite. We start it at the top of the hill and then we're making it come down the slope bit by bit. We're taking little chunks here, one after another, little strips, until we get all the way to the bottom.
This was my first day on a prescribed burn, and coming from the suppression world, it was an interesting shift in my thinking.
People are very cautious because there's a long-term vision for this. It's not worth taking any kind of risks.
There were moments when, you know, this suppression side of me wanted to do something about, you know, the heat of the fire. And I had to learn techniques on how to use the firing, you know, the drip torches to kind of control the amount of heat and where fire was actually going.
Somebody who it's their first day on a fire line, any kind of fire line, are encouraged, if they want, to pick up a drip torch and, guided by somebody who knows what they're doing, walk through a 7-acre unit and, you know, strategically lay good fire on the ground. And that's a very rare opportunity, which is something that's really special and unique about this project.
This isn't the first time I personally have used a torch. I grew up on a reservation, and just using fire in this way, I call it good fire. I'm seeing a lot of my other co-crew leads and other members being able to use the torch for the very first time in their whole life. Just put a smile to my face. They were happy, and that makes me happy.
When you see fire and you look at the landscape, you see what it is naturally consumed, and it translates really well to structure defense and making your home defensible, because then you're able to see what fire would consume and you're able to cut that yourself. It kind of demystifies the like, oh, for fire safety, we have to clear cut, just straight up, outright, all the trees are the problem. When it's like, no, it's because we've delved into such a culture of repression for 100 years or so.
Being able to use all of this knowledge that we only had as knowledge, we now have as experience. This learning experience for them and me is beyond invaluable. That was probably our biggest takeaway for the day.
Tucker was fortunate enough to get a large grant to get the mechanical fuel reduction done on his property, so he didn't have to pay for all of it. But moving forward, all of this brush is going to grow back. But thankfully, because he had the Prescribed Burn Association come out and do this burn, he can now maintain it much more economically than if he were to try and do mechanical fuel reduction again in the future, because it's unlikely that he would get a grant again in the future. This whole area around us, the West Bear Project, has had millions of dollars of fuel reduction work done just recently in the past few years. And so if prescribed burning is not used to maintain that work, the fuels are all going to grow back and all of that money is going to have been wasted. If you're going to hire a contract crew, a mechanical fuel work is something in the $1,600 to $2,300 an acre range. And controlled burning, if you were hiring a contract crew, would probably be in the $800 to $1,000 an acre range. And the work we did today was in the buy some soda and sandwiches for everybody who volunteer range and pay for the drip torches. So it's a much more cost-effective way to do this work as well.
This isn't a simple one-step process. People who were here first, the people who came before us, have been using fire to their benefit for really ever, for time immemorial, right? But I do want to make sure that we acknowledge and respect the fact that we are relearning what those people have been practicing. We need to reevaluate our relationship to fire and learn how we can actually do good with it.
A lot of people came out here to see fire on the ground. They wanted to take part. What I said is, I'm here to see community. I'm here to see what the future could look like when we work together as communities, as neighbors, agencies, fire departments, everybody working together to make this happen. This isn't easy. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of people agreeing that the vision of this community is a realistic and responsible one. And I see happy people working together, getting to know each other, feeling a sense of accomplishment that they're going to go home tonight knowing that their community is a little bit safer and the landscape around them is a little bit healthier. But everybody coming together behind this vision. So that's the thing that really is inspiring to me.
The collaborative nature of controlled burning with a prescribed burn association is absolutely critical that we have partners that are involved. Landowners can't do this on their own. Community members can't do it on their own.
Us providing water, to us, it's no big deal. But to them, it meant a lot. So that's where coming together, you know, different groups, different agencies, different people can really have huge benefits.
People should kind of work together to do it themselves and build this community cohesiveness. That's really the goal of this. And the Prescribed Burn Association can actually spread to many Prescribed Burn Associations. We shouldn't have a Rogue Valley Prescribed Burn Association. We should have an Anderson Creek Prescribed Burn Association, a Wagner Creek Prescribed Burn Association. Each neighborhood should work together to protect their own community. So that's kind of this democratization of prescribed burning so that we don't have to have big groups coming down to donate lots of money to do fuel reduction work for us every 15 years or 20 years, because that's not sustainable. We need to kind of take responsibility for it and have communities actually work towards this goal of community resilience on their own.
My hope is that in the future, what this landowner has done here and what the Prescribed Burn Association has done will expand. More people will do what we did here today.
You know, I always think you should leave it better than you found it. It took us years and years and decades to get into where we are now with the wildfire risk in the Pacific Northwest. And it's going to take us years and years and decades to get out of it. I think that doing this kind of work is just one step in that really long process. I'm hoping that when my kid comes of age and he's the steward of this land, that I'll have left in a better place for him. You know, he can move forward and build off what I built. If you're actively managing land and you're actively managing a forest, that work never stops. It's not a one and done thing. You have to continuously come back and ask and question to make the right choices for the land.
Well, that's all I have for you guys tonight.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, good job.
There you go. This last video, you know, I could say ditto to all of it. It's very similar to what our